So, guys, so today on the podcast, we are going to talk to Shawn Williams. Shawn Williams was, he's a black belt under Renzo. He's been training since the mid 90s. And when you listen to the podcast, I really enjoyed it because I love what did they call it? Did they call it the butterfly effect or whatever, where like one little thing happens and it just like ripples out, right? My analogy of that is that it's like you're a boat going down the river. And everything that happens to you simply adjusts your direction like a couple degrees, right? Like if you come across a really good mentor in your life, like I can say this, from personal experience, I've came across like really good, older guys, which is really important for young men, right? Mentors who simply just nudged me in a direction. Seemed like inconsequential at the time, but then like 10, 20 years down the road, it was like, oh my God, my life is completely different because of that experience.
Right.
And his is like pretty interesting, where it's like just a random experience that would have been very normal to most people in the 90s. Like you had that happen, and then all of a sudden, 20 years later, your life it's completely different because of that. And so I always find these stories interesting. And so, yeah, guys, we'll jump into the podcast. Again, as always, thanks to Charlotte's Web for helping bring the podcast to you guys. If you're interested in trying out any of their CBD products, whether it's their line of gummies, their tinctures, they've got a really good muscle balm that you can try out called CBD Medic.
Yes.
Which I'm a big fan of. When I just recently, I've been, something that happens as you get older in your training, like little injuries just pop up, and a lot of times, especially with me, it's a lot of times they never get serious because I back off the pedal, so to speak. But they help out. The balm really does help, like with my knees, sometimes with my shoulders, because those are the two that use.
Yeah, more muscular type stuff. Really helps.
Yeah. So a lot of times if it's like a muscular thing where my muscle gets tight or beat up, or sometimes just overworked, like if I'm playing a lot of half guard, my shoulders get janky a little bit, I'll rub it on there. But again, I always encourage people to try it out, try out the challenge, if you will, for 30 days and just see, because again, a lot of times people will try like CBD for a day.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel anything. And it takes a while for a lot of times for people to, I think, for it to saturate. So usually I tell people, get one of the tinctures, and just try it out for a month and see how you feel. And then just see how everything goes over the course of it. In the way that if you do try it out, I would encourage you to do it this way. Try it out. First off, for me, my biggest thing with it is rest. This is one of my rituals that I do at nighttime. So at nighttime, as I'm getting ready to wind down, I will take my tincture of, right now I'm doing the tincture of CBD. I go take a shower, and I get the shower, brush my teeth. I come into the bedroom. I start to stretch. I'll stretch out for just a few minutes, a couple tight areas. I'll lay down and start reading. Right now I'm reading I'm still reading Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
I know. I haven't read it since I was in high school. I wanted to read it, so I am a nerd, man. I'm a big nerd.
I don't think I've ever read that book.
Yeah, so I wanted to read
the books.
It's interesting. His writing sometimes can be kind of monotonous, but at the same time, there's a lot of detail to the book that never got put in the movies. But it's an interesting. I liked it, and again, I'm trying out fiction to see how fiction seems to help me sleep better.
Okay.
Because it's like my mind, what happens is I'll get these business books and marketing books, and there's really cool stuff. I'm like, ooh, I can try this. And I wake up at 4 a.m. and I can't sleep anymore. Whereas if I read the fiction, it's like my mind relaxes. I'm, reading a story, then I just fall off to bed. And if I wake up in the middle of the night, and maybe to use the restroom and I have to go back to sleep and I have trouble, I'll read the book for 5 minutes, go right back to sleep. No problem. None of that. You toss and turn for an hour trying to sleep.
Yeah.
None of that. Just I read it for, 5 minutes, go back to sleep. So then I do that, and then I go to sleep, and I've done it back and forth without the CBD, and I always feel better when a CBD is a part of my daily routine.
Yeah.
So again, if you want to check it out, go to charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jujutsu. Save 15% on the order. And again, everybody's different. So you might use it. It may not help you out as much as it does for the Chewster, but hey, you never know. So try it out, throw it into the routine and see how you feel. Just like any other supplement, it's just worth trying out. And again, the cool thing about the supplement is that it's, third-party tested. So again, it's an unregulated product still. So all kinds of stuff can be in there or not be in there, depending on the scruples of the company. And luckily it's third-party tested. So whatever's on the box, when you look on the little label here that says all the stuff that's in it, it'll be in there. And also big thanks to Matt at Epic Roll. He's been a sponsor with us for probably getting close to 2 years now.
Probably. Yeah.
Recently he sent me some of his Noogie shorts, and I love them. Like I posted about them the other day. I'm a fan of them. I've been using them a bunch because there's nothing like. If you guys have ever had like a piece of clothing that you just loved, it was like, yes, this like, your favorite shirt, your favorite this, that, whatever. And then even when it gets all ratty and ragged out, you still want it. Like it's like you get like this emotional attachment to this piece of like fabric, right? Which is ridiculous, but we all have it, right? It's like when you're a kid, you get that your favorite blanket or stuffed animal and like the ice falling out of the teddy bear and stuffing, and your parents are trying to like duct tape it back together or something. With a lot of times with the shorts, I've had several situations where I've had these great MMA shorts, these great grappling shorts, and I love them. And then the darn Velcro starts like coming undone. It's like the Velcro's cheap and just starts falling apart. So then all of a sudden I've got a pair of shorts that are great shorts. They're otherwise, in good shape, but now you have this unfixable problem. I don't want to say it's unfixable. I mean, I'm sure someone could do it. Hey, maybe one of you guys wants to like have like a great business idea, like make a Velcro repair kit for people's shorts. You'll make at least $100. You'll be 100 air. Instead of
just sell like one or two of them.
Instead of a millionaire, you'll be 100 air. I got $100 idea. But no, I love the shorts because again, there's a drawstring, of course, and they've got the elastic band, but otherwise there's no Velcro. So there's no like, again, I've been wearing them for a few weeks now. I mean, they've been great. They're very comfortable to move in and everything else. They're actually very loose, which, I mean, there's no mobility restrictions. Like I remember back in the day when Sprawl came out with their shorts originally.
I love those.
They're great shorts. The first batch that they came out with, they had to like, they weren't so good. You couldn't really, like, the crotch was too tight.
Yeah.
And then they got better with that, right? Well, these are kind of like athletic shorts meets like, training. Like back in the day, like one of my favorite pairs of shorts to train Noogie was a pair of athletic shorts from Adidas, but they had pockets. So you couldn't either get, things get stuck, where these have no pockets. They have the elastic string, no Velcro. So I'm going to see how long they last. I'm going to beat them up real bad. So this way I can test them out, but stress test them. But so far it's so good. Comfortable. No Velcro. If you want to check them out, go to epicrollbgj.com. Promo code is Jujitsu. Save 15% on the order. And as you probably already know, if you're an avid podcast listener, Matt has a bunch of stuff besides just Noogie shorts. He also has gis, t-shirts that have really cool designs, hats, everything else. So good, check it out if you're looking for some more Noogie or gi or Jiu-Jitsu gear in general. Check them out over there. And then, guys, I always say this to you when you're on the podcast. If you want to support the podcast directly so that we can do more stuff, one of the things we are trying to do in the future is bring out guests to here. It's something we were going to do last year, but the whole 2020 thing and novel virus that's going around and nobody knows what the hell's going to happen. That whole thing happened, and now that we're okay to some degree, we're planning on bringing out more guests and stuff like that. And again, the Patreon will be using that money to help fund that as well, to bring these guests out here. So again, if you want to help support the podcast, to bring you more content, to do things like that, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And again, you can sign up. You can get all the content that we've added on. You can always unsubscribe. And there will be some different content added up there soon. I'm in the process of moving, which I normally do meetups on there. I haven't done a meetup for about 2 weeks, and it's because I've been moving. I've been doing the whole process of closing on a house, moving, and everything else, it is what it is, right? That's almost done. And so now that that's almost done, I'll be back to the schedule, and we'll have some cool content updated there as well, which will be fun. So again, if you want to get the content that I'm talking about, along with podcast extras, along with videos of rolling and all kinds of really cool stuff, check it out. It's incredibly inexpensive, but it's a lot of cool stuff. We try to make sure it's not too expensive, because I know like a lot of you guys are young. Like we've got guys that are like in their 20s and stuff like that. They're Patreons, and so again, you don't necessarily have like a ton of disposable income, but you can check it out and you can go there and look at that. So guys, with that said, let's get to the podcast. Cool, man. So I'm curious, being one of those guys that was a part of the sort of the original like Renzo crew, right?
Yeah.
Like, how did you get involved with grappling anyway?
So I was involved in karate from a very young age. I mean, because I'm old. There was no jiu-jitsu when I was
right.
a kid. And so I got involved with that when I was 12. And of course, UFC, I think the first UFC I saw was number 2. I didn't see number 1. I saw number 2, and I was just like, whoa, shocked as everybody else. And so then that was like, wow, I got to try to figure out that, but that's crazy. But really I was just on almost a senior in high school at the time. Yeah. And so there was just nothing like that around. So I was off on my way. I was in upstate New York going to school at a school called Cortland State one time. And on my drive back to Indiana, there was this little martial arts. It's on the side. It said, martial arts supply store or something like this. So I was like, well, that's interesting. I'd like to go see what that is. It's just like a barn. It looked like a barn on the side of the road. And so I got off at the exit and went up there, and they had Renzo's first instructional series. So it was Renzo Gracie and Craig Kukuk, and they had like a 12.
I had that one.
Yeah, 12. Yeah. Remember that one?
Uh-huh.
And they had a 12. It was like 11 or 12 VHS tapes, and they had them all. And I was like, wow, I got to rent these. And I asked the guy, hey, how long can I rent these for? Can I rent them for a week? He said, yeah. So I took them home. I watched them all as VHS, and then on my way back, I returned them, and then I would just practice, because I was still involved in martial arts a lot, even in Cortland, and I just would I basically did home study with some of my friends, until then I saw that Renzo fight in World Combat Championship, and then I had read shortly after that he was opening in New York City, so I just said, I gotta go meet this guy and see if I like this, and lucky for me, he was such a nice guy that I decided to move to New York just on a whim. It was in Indiana during the summer of that year. I said, I'm going to go. And I moved to New York and started grappling, started doing jiu-jitsu.
What was like your first day or first experience? Was it what you thought it would be? Because you kind of had, usually people walk in and they don't know what to expect. You had a good amount of background. You kind of saw a little bit about grappling. You almost, you saw Renzo kind of watching videos and knowing about the Gracie family and watching UFC too. You knew about the Gracie. So walking in, what did you experience, and kind of, was it surprising?
Yeah, it was kind of like everything I was hoping. I went in, back then we were in this, the 5th floor. He was in the 5th floor on 27th Street. So I went up this elevator, this old creaky, cracky elevator. And then the doors open, and then I came out in the lobby, and it was just, there's a sea of mats, with a bunch of guys doing jiu-jitsu. And I just went into the office, and Renzo was sitting right there. I'm like, that's the guy on the video. That's the guy that stepped on Ben Spiker's head. That's funny. And yeah, met him. He was just such a sweetheart of a guy. He was so welcoming. And then I was like, wow, this guy's super nice. I watched the class, everybody training, and just thought, wow, I want to try this. And then like literally a month later, I moved to New York, and I was on the mats with everybody, with like Matt Serra beating me up and all these guys. Matt Serra was a blue belt back then at the time. And so, yeah, there's a whole slew of white belts and blue belts, and like a smattering of, there's a purple belt or maybe a brown belt. And that was it. And I just fell in love with it.
When you were moving up there, I'm curious, because I imagine it was still expensive back then. New York's not a cheap place to live or be. No. So you're a guy coming from Indiana, moving up to New York. What did you do when you got there? Like, where did you live? Like, what did you do for work originally when you moved up there?
Yeah, those are great questions, man. I was terrified. I was terrified of New York City, because I'm from the country, the country. There's nothing around. And so when I went, I went with what was now my ex-wife, but we went there, and I was just like, we can't. I don't know if it's a good idea to drive in New York City. We were like, no, we're not driving in New York City. So the first time we went, we parked in New Jersey, and then took a bus to the ferry then we walked to the train, because we had no idea what the heck we were doing. And so then I got a newspaper, and the first place I lived was Staten Island, because it was relatively inexpensive. I went to school and borrowed took student loans out to help me live. For number one, I just like took the maximum student loan out so I could help me live, help me pay for jiu-jitsu. And then in the beginning, I just did every odd job that I could figure out to do. I was an inventory specialist, I think it's called. So I had like a keyboard on my waist. Was the worst job. It's the only job I ever walked out. I really take pride in my work, and any job I did, even if I didn't like it, that job was the first job I ever literally like walked out on, because it was just a bad experience. But yeah, I was anything I could do at the to get income, to help pay for jiu-jitsu, help pay for the cost of living in New York, which at the time was super expensive compared to Indiana. And then I eventually, I was going to school. Then I eventually bartended. I changed my major to fitness so that it would have something to do with jiu-jitsu. Then I went from bartending to personal training, and then started teaching jiu-jitsu after that. And that's sort of like my little ladder of how I got even involved in teaching as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. So what made you walk out of the job?
Well, we almost got killed. Like on the way to this job, like the manager, the gal was just completely out of her mind. So I was following her with zero experience driving in New York City, and we come up to we're going on the Staten Island I think it's the Verrazano Bridge, and she's in the far left, and we need to get off at the far right. And I don't know if she just forgot I was following her, but we went to the right, and I was head on with like a humongous part of the bridge. So on the way there, it was already bad. And then what really did it in was we were doing some inventory for Home Depot, a store called Home Depot. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with it. Yeah. And I had to count the nails in the store. So I was already like, this job is kind of not for me. But when you get to like 14 like nails, individual,
but they come in like the big, like they don't really like, they have the packages, but then they have like just the big dump, like the big piles of them.
That's it. We had to count those. Like these big piles of nails. I think like I was like got to like 1,400, and I was like, this is it. This isn't for me, not the job for me. So I left my calculator on the floor. I got what was my girlfriend at the time. We're out of here. It's the first job I ever walked out of my life. I usually like do the right thing. Like I was like, no. So I can imagine, they went to the aisle, like what just happened? Like a ghost. Yeah.
So, as far as you were training jiu-jitsu and kind of having these odd jobs, do you remember a time we actually had to use jiu-jitsu in bartending or any other time? Was there like a time like, wait a second, let's see if this works, and kind of how did it turn out?
Yeah. To be really honest, bartending was pretty easy. I worked at this massive club called Webster Hall in New York City. So it was a blast. So they had 44 security guards that were like as big as houses. So I never had to worry about it there. But in a bar in New York, I just clinched a guy in a simple type of environment where, you just use a clinch and put the guy down, and it's over as fast as it starts usually, especially with untrained, belligerent people. But fortunately for me, like I've always been a good, I think it's just because I've been in martial arts for a very long time. I've always had pretty good awareness on, what's going on in the environment, and, choose my battles appropriately, and if I could stay out of trouble, I will, and as long as something isn't a real life threat. So there's only been a few of those in New York City that you have to do easy things with. When you guys know, when jiu-jitsu and somebody else doesn't, it's like it's literally like taking candy from a baby, as long as you know how to control someone. And they usually the fight usually leaves pretty quick when it's somebody that's shouldn't be picking on you. It usually leaves pretty quick. Yeah, I do have a story with one of my students. I mean, I've got multiple stories from students that successfully use jiu-jitsu. If you want to hear those,
sure.
I believe he's about 64 years old. And he was on the subway, and a guy, big muscular guy, was messing with a lady on the subway. And this guy's as skinny as can be. He came running up to me at class one day at a private lesson. He came running up to me in New York, and he was like, I can't believe it. I just used jujitsu on the subway and it worked. And the whole subway was cheering. And because he doesn't, apparently he walked up to the guy and said, you shouldn't be yelling. And the guy like two-handed him. And when he came to two-hand him again, he arm dragged him and sat him on the seat. And then of course, everybody else got involved in the subway. And so he was just like, ecstatic. So that was pretty cool. And I did have a girl in LA saved her life, completely saved her life. A bear hug defense saved her life. She had been stalked. That's why she started jiu-jitsu. The guy was getting out of jail. She got the letter that the guy was going to get out of jail. The guy showed up, broke into her house, had followed her home from work, broke into her house, bear hugged her from behind. And my schools have never been like really heavy self-defense orientated, but we definitely do grappling situations that I believe are important for street fights and for things like this. And she dumped him on his head. She tried to taser him first, and he knocked the taser out of her hand. And then she tried to run. He bear hugged her. She dumped him on his head, kicked him in the face, and then tasered him in the neck. And then the police came in. And so fortunately for her, it saved her life. So it's pretty crazy story.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I feel like every guy that's, been coaching for long enough, if the teacher's been doing it for long enough, they have a myriad of those stories to share, just because, again, a lot of times people come in seeking something anyway. So that, I imagine the woman probably came in partly maybe because of the incident that happened with that person maybe before. If she's getting calls and he's getting out, obviously something happened before. Yeah. But I usually get people that come into the gym for a reason or another, and then when they get into it, it's useful to them. I was curious, what year? Because I didn't ask you earlier, but what year did you start training? Just so because I'm curious about like the time frame, so I'm putting it in my own head, the image of that time frame.
Yeah, I started in late '96, so more or less September of 1996.
And then when did you get promoted to black belt?
It was April of 2002. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So pretty darn quick then.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell everybody I trained, I probably put in, 10 years of mat time for the average person. And I put it in very short amount of time because I was at and when I got basically in my blue belt phase, I mean, I was already training 3 months into my training. I was training like about 5 hours a day. And then because I love sports, I did competitive sports ever since I was a little kid. So I think that already gave me that drive to train like an athlete. So I was doing 5 to 6 hours a day of training for the majority of the time that I had been training. And then when I got blue belt, purple belt, I started an early morning class at Renzo's. And so then I was there literally from 7 a.m. until 11 at night, every single day. And then Sundays, John and I taught an MMA class. I was there 7 days a week. And so I think I put in like 10 years of mat time. I just did it really fast. So yeah, when you're training that much time, you get good quick.
Who are your, you said John Donaher, correct? That's who you're referring to. And was he one of your main, or who were kind of some of your main training partners at that time? And how did you guys, train together, learn from each other? And did you, he's obviously a great instructor, and you see a lot of his instructionals and his way of breaking things down. Did you see some of those things? Everybody have like some unique quirks or talents that they had that really kind of helped you as well?
Yeah, man. I always tell myself, tell everyone I felt like I was super lucky, because when I started, so my teachers there was obviously Renzo, that was my main instructor. And then under him was Ricardo Almeida, Rodrigo Gracie, and Matt Serra. Those guys all taught classes. So they taught the noon class primarily. Ricardo kind of in and out because he had been teaching and helping Renzo in New Jersey as well. But those were my teachers, and so they all had like unique attributes and unique techniques that were definitely very, very helpful in my progression, and just all wonderful people and wonderful instructors. And then training partner wise, John and I got our black belts on the same day. So we were, we had been training partners for the entire time. We taught together. We co-taught most of the classes after Matt and Rodrigo went to open their school. Then it became John and I were the main teachers at Renzo's. It would be John and I and Renzo were the main instructors there. And then teammates were like, obviously John. There's Joe D'Arcy, the guy that's the Darce choke is named after. Yeah. So you might know him as Joe Darce, but his name is actually Joe D'Arcy. A slew of other guys that were just like at my level, or I was promoted like slightly above those guys. There was a guy named Jamie Cruz who has a school in New Jersey. He was training the Miller brothers. There's a guy named Jamal Patterson. He was one of my training partners and students, and he has a school. There was a guy named Magno Gama who has a Renzo Gracie Queens school, who was Gianni Grippo's head coach as a youth, all the way through until he became older. And there's a guy named Alan Teo who has a school in New Jersey. Silver Fox was one of my students. Carl Previck, I don't know if you know Silver Fox very well, but his nickname is Silver Fox. He's the guy who pushed me to do the early morning class. And I was always like, Carl, I'm going to pay you back one day, because he was only him for a long time, and then it became 2, 3, 4, and then it got massive. And then just there's a smattering. I'm forgetting a lot of people. There's a good friend of mine named Gene Dunn, and so many different people, and also not only the guys that were there, but the guys that came through. We always had access to all these super high level guys, like High and Gracie was coming, Half came, Feitosa came, Nino Shimbri came. Anyone that was inside that umbrella came through the doors and would help. They would help teach, they would help train. And so it was amazing. Hodger would come, just like the names go on and on and on and on.
When you trained back then, because obviously, like you were saying, you had all these big name guys, very high level practitioners coming through. Was there anyone that ever, because everybody's had something where they've had these experience where you roll with someone and you roll with them, you're like, I did pretty good against that person that, was this, that, whatever. And then sometimes like you roll with someone and you're like, that guy totally blew me away with what it actually felt like to be, because it's one thing to see, and then it's another thing to feel with someone, like when you're rolling with them. Have you ever rolled, and I'm sure you've had multiple sort of situations like this, but do you remember any of these situations where you rolled with someone and you were literally just floored by the skill or the ability of the person that you were rolling with? Yeah, absolutely.
As I was mentioning, I was lucky, like even coming up, I tell stories to my students, my athletes, and say, training with the gi or no gi, what is it? And, Matt Serra is sort of one of those guys that's known as a UFC champion and known as like, sort of a no gi guy. I will tell you one thing. I had a very good spider guard when I was coming up the ranks, and I couldn't even get a grip on, like I couldn't get a lasso on him. That's how good his passing was with the gi. So he was always one of those guys that was just like, my God, man, am I ever going to get to be like that? Besides Renzo, because Renzo trained with us on the normal too. And so that was always like a treat, because you just be like, what, how am I ever going to get to that level? But those were just my normal training partners. So you get kind of like, yeah, this is normal. I'm battling with my normal training partners. Visitor wise, the guy that always stood out to me visitor wise, because he was a purple belt and at purple belt, I had skills. I had real skills. Oftentimes you get purple belts and you feel like, man, I have skills. I'm hanging with world champions at all levels, at black belt, guys that are coming in. Well, one guy came in and just dismantled me. It was Nino Shimbri. And he just came in and I literally was like, what is that? What just happened to me? Like, and this is after training with a lot of other high level guys. He just dismantled me. He was that good. He was that good. He's just on another planet. Yeah. It's really, really freaky.
What's your process, if you do have that situation, you do have a tough training session, what's your process for overcoming that? How do you kind of break that down and kind of move on? Do you try to, one thing I'll do is I'll ask, okay, what can I do better, or what do you see here? Like, what was your process kind of mentally and physically kind of overcoming a tough training session, or just getting handled by a training partner?
That's a great question. I think for me, so my goal was never in jiu-jitsu, was never belts, was never, I didn't have those goals. What my main goal was to be the best that I could be. And I think when I had those type of training sessions, I would just be more, I like to solve problems. I think that even my wife would probably be like, yeah, you definitely like to solve problems, and you go down these can easily go off down a rabbit hole just to solve a problem. I've always been like that. I always like to solve problems. And so those things were just problems for me. They just, I'd get handled like that, and it would be more inspiring, I guess you could say, than wow, I'm never going to be that good. It would be more like, how am I going to be that good? That's possible. That's a human being. That means that is possible to be that good. How can I do that? I want to be that good. And so I think instead of it being something that's, inachievable, it would be, I would look at it as, this is possible. And now I need to know how to go about it. What's the training protocol to be that way? And so for me, that's kind of how I always looked at it. I feel, and I feel like I did a pretty good job of that, where you always have those peaks and valleys. I tell my athletes and the students all the time, I'm sure you guys as well, it's that you have those peaks and valleys. But if you're optimistic and you look at things positively, I feel like the peaks don't go down as much as they could when you're training, because it's, you're going to have bad days. As far as what I feel is important is, if you look at what you're doing and your goal sets as far as technique, like how am I going to use the technique as it's supposed to be used in the right setting? It makes it so it's not sort of me versus that guy. Because once you start comparing yourself to others, as you guys all know, that's a road that you are not gonna. It's not gonna be good to go down that road. Moreover, it's like, hey, what is that guy doing? He's better than me. How can I get to that level? Use them as inspiration rather than some sort of roadblock or that just gets in your way.
Yeah, I think I was listening to you. I think I was probably eaten up with it, just like you were eaten up with jiu-jitsu in the beginning. Because I'll talk to my students, and I get a lot of questions online from people, like, where they'll say they're frustrated or on the verge of quitting or something like that because they had a bad day or maybe a bad week or whatever it might be. And or even someone came into their gym and just wrecked them, and for me, like, whenever that happened, whenever I would get wrecked at, say, a competition, if it happened, or if, like, say someone just got the better of me, like, every now and then we'd have like a college wrestler come in and I wouldn't have an answer for it. It would like rack my brain like constantly, but it wasn't like I wanted to quit. It wasn't like I never thought, I suck at this. It was more of like frustrated, but then I was, like you said, inspired to, like, all right, let's figure out what can we do to, like, get this. And I don't know if you did the same thing, but a lot of times when I would run into, say, like a higher level practitioner and get just blown away by how good they were, I would like start bugging them with questions like, how often do you train? Like how long do you do this? Do you work takedowns? Like, how do you drill? I would ask them so many questions, because in my brain, like, I wanted to know, like, how did you get here? So this way, like, I can try to replicate the same thing. Like, I would travel to gyms and I would watch the way that some of the gyms train. And this was as like an early coach when I was younger, like about 10 years ago. And I would like watch like groups train. I'm like, okay, they're drilling for like an hour and they're doing this move and they're doing the one movement, like 1,000 reps or something. Or, they're rolling situational rolls instead of just full rolling all the time. Okay, we need to bring that back, and did you do the same process in your own self, where you're like kind of traveling or meeting different people and then like taking little bits and pieces from these different sort of areas or these different people and then bringing it back to yourself?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I had lengthy talks with Nino after that, and just saying, like, what do you do? How do you do? How do you train? What do you do? And luckily I had been able to go to Brazil every year. I went for 5 years straight when I started at blue belt. And so I got to see him down there and watch him train and watch all of the guys train down there as well that were, they were all obviously some world-class black belts in the academy. So I got to see how they trained, and it just inspires some different thoughts in your head. But exactly that, just ask questions and get to know how these guys get to that level. And then now you have some sort of roadmap. If that road has already been traveled, why try to recreate the same road on a forest that's got a bunch of trees in the way? Take the one that the trees have already been chopped down. Yeah. Much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then you think about that. So thinking about that, like you do follow that road, and then you sort of do at some point venture off into your own sort of area, like, and that's like for you. So for instance, you're known for having this, you have a guard that's named after you, right? The Shawn Williams guard. That's a position, right? It's kind of fun to have a position named after you, because with our naming system in jiu-jitsu, that's typically how it works, right? Like like someone does something really well, this is the blah blah blah, like you said, the Darce choke or DRC choke. Or Ezekiel was another one of those, right? There was a dude doing the Ezekiel choke. So when did you start using that Shawn Williams guard? How did that come about?
It was an accident, man. Like I often say, what does it say? What's the saying? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Mm-hmm. So when we were training for a fight one day. Renzo Gracie had an early MMA fight coming up, and he had we were all doing rounds with him. And I had a good close guard, so I was in the close guard a lot. And Nino had just been up there recently, so I was pulling my foot to my face like a rubber guard, like basically how he did it, what's now called rubber guard, but pulling my foot up to my face. I was flexible like that, and in normal scenarios, I could get omoplata pretty well like that. But one of my training partners that day had a tank top on. So he had no shirt. So every time I pulled my foot over his face, he would literally just explode out, and he kept slipping out. And then by accident, I just stuck my hand under my knee and I held his shoulder. And then when he tried to get out, he lifted me up off of the ground, and then boom. And then I omoplated him. I was like, wait a minute, did that really just work? And so then I started doing it over and over and over and over. And then guys started countering it. Once they realized what was going on, they would drive me back to center and drive their head in. So then I didn't just hold under my knee. I made a frame, because then that held their head at bay, and then it opened up a whole nother, sequence. And then it just became a system, because there's only so many things that can happen there. And then it just started to get as systemized, and until because your training partners are going to give you every single look. When you've got great training partners, they're going to give you every single look that can happen. And so over time, it just became a system, just like everything else over time. You get problems, you solve them. Then there are new problems that come up, you solve those. And then you've got like, hey, wow, this is a pretty cool little system that works really well. And that's it. It was just by accident, man. And no like, I'm going to create this. I feel that's the
way it happens most of the time, isn't it?
I had a friend that was training with us back in the day, and he called Renzo's the lab back in the day, because that's the Darce choke that was invented there. I mean, that was a wrestling technique that Danaher and he sort of started that whole process of that strangle, and then he and I sort of worked all the kinks out of it, and then we got it and showed Renzo, and it was like that. Renzo was like, "Yeah, man, that is a seriously good strangle." And then Joe D'Arcy used it on a guy so much that when the guy went back to his school in Vegas, he said, I believe his teacher was Mark Lehman. Lehman was like, "What did he get you with?" And he said, like, "I don't know, this thing like this." And so then they named it the Darce choke. But back then there were things like coming out of the woodwork like crazy. And I don't think anybody was like, let's make up a move because we want to make up moves. It happened because we had to, because otherwise training was like this and you couldn't get an inch. Mm-hmm. And so then you do things that all of a sudden start opening up. Oh, wow, look what happened here. This now is available because I moved my arm here, or I made a grip under the leg with the belt weird, and it made a sweep possible that I could never sweep this guy with before. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Was there any, like, as far as the process of realizing or figuring out if a position is useful? What was that process for you? How much research and development, and you just kind of, what did you do to kind of realize like this is a legit movement, this is a legit position that's going to be effective, instead of just like, oh, it's something that kind of was a fluke?
Yeah, I just would test things. So if it worked, if something like that worked, I would just keep doing it over and over and over to see what level it would stop at. And like, with the Williams guard, and by the way, like Danaher named it that. I never like the name things after myself, but because it always was like kind of weird, be like, oh, that Williams guard. So now I just pretend that it's some other Williams.
but that makes it more genuine. It's like a nickname, right? Like if you get a nickname from someone, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what it is, but like you can't like just give yourself a nickname. The nickname has to be dubbed to you from the people around you,
That's right. That's right. So, but with that guard, man, it just kept going up. Like I was a blue belt when so I started that guard in 98. And I was, so I was only a blue belt, but then, I could get, when I could get brown belts and even some visiting black belts in that guard, I could finish them. And so then that's when I knew like, whoa, this is something. So my philosophy was always, I tested it first. And then I went to Renzo and said, hey, this is working for me. And then he would feel it and he would be like, let me feel it. And then be like, hey, this is really cool. Let's make sure we figure out defenses for this, or et cetera, et cetera. And then it would just go like that. Yeah. That's how this basically, so that there was a testing phase before I would approach anybody and then go, yeah, I guess it's working on these guys, so it must be valid.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question for this is kind of like random, but you said the word strangle. So I remember when I was a white belt, me and my buddy it was within our first couple of weeks of training, our coach was, he was saying, all right, guys, I'm going to show you guys how to do the rear naked choke. Right. And, and I remember we were asking him about like, was it like blood or wind or whatever? And he no, we're just cutting off the carotid. So it's blood. I was okay. And then me and my buddy were talking about it. We were like, well, I think that actually technically it's a strangle, and we like looked it up. We went online like, no, it's a strangle. So I remember like, when we went back to training, we're like, so coach, what we're actually doing is not a choke. It's actually a strangle. Like we brought it up to him. He's like, just be quiet, white belts. Like get back to doing ridiculous chokes, and, did you guys always use the term strangle, or was that something that's like someone threw in there later on?
Yeah, later on, pretty much that John's devious mind. And I think like John just likes the term strangle better. Like it just sounds more brutal.
It does sound more violent. Yeah, doesn't it?
It sounds much more violent. I think we know. I don't think anybody really cared about what the name, but then he's on that genius level. So I think it's just like, mate, it's a strangle, mate. And then it's just, it's got this, okay, yeah, that's a good word. So we'll just use strangle now.
I got you.
Yeah. But because you're right, Chewy, it is what you do. It is a strangle. You're not choking. You are strangling them. And so it makes perfect sense. But yeah, we didn't always call it strangle.
So so choke would be?
Choke's wind.
Wind.
Yeah.
So choke is wind.
Choke is wind. Yeah.
Okay. Blood is okay. Yeah. I mean, I'll just rear naked choke, or
we
choke, whatever.
Yeah, we just say choke, but it's
what if it's both?
What
if it's both?
Because you could asphyxiate that. There's a there's like that cobra. I think it's called a cobra. I don't know what it's that pin from cross-side where you grab the chin, and it will eventually strangle someone unconscious. But it's literally it's an asphyxiation. You're just like closing the windpipe, and so now they're just literally asphyxiating themselves. So yeah, there's some of those. There's so yeah, but I was just John. I think John really was the one that was like, listen, let's call it what it really is. And all right.
Yeah, I remember we asked all kinds of random questions like that, like where we would be doing like an arm bar and then we would do the knee bar. And we're like, well, wouldn't this be a leg bar? It's like, it was like, and this be an elbow bar, like, it's like, shut up, white belts, just get back to practicing,
being annoying at that point. We do the thing.
We were just curious, we were just young kids and asking questions. So
Shawn, like as far as your game, you had that Williams guard. How much of that was your game, and how was your game kind of changed and evolved and developed? Even look at right now, you've gotten obviously older and been training, and how's your game developed and modified and adjusted over the years?
Great question, man. I think it's like a sort of as a coach, I think you have to experiment with a large volume of techniques because you're a coach. If you're, if you're just doing it for yourself or you're a competitor, I think that's a different mindset. I don't think you need to go down the roads that you really just don't care to go down. But as a coach, you should try to understand the majority of jiu-jitsu, at least if you're, or if you're a specialized coach, then sure, then you can specialize in just that. But so for me, I always played around with this massive world of jiu-jitsu, whether it was lapel things or whatever it might be. But my game itself, I just listened to what felt good for me. So like it just evolved with, I think it did evolve with my age a little bit. I like both styles, loose and tight. So it really depends on what my goal sets are for jiu-jitsu. So if right now I'm getting back into training pretty regularly. So my goal is just to get in shape. So if you looked at my game, it's just a lot of movement. That would not typically be if I competed tomorrow. My game would just be, I would try to crush you. That I like old school smashing stuff now, mixed in with some of this dynamic leg pummeling that I've been doing for years and years and years. So I think it just was a natural evolution. I didn't by design say this is what I want my game to be. I just played with a lot of different techniques and what felt good for my body and what worked on the highest level training partners is what I tend to stick with. I mean, in LA, I would go train with Homelo on a regular basis and all of these guys on a regular basis. And so I really took heart in like what's working at the highest levels. That's what I want to spend my time on. And then that'd be my personal game are things like that. And then everything else would be like, okay, I need to learn worm guard because I have competitors that are training with the gi. I'm not going to do worm guard, but I'll learn it and I'll play around with it enough to understand it and et cetera, et cetera. Because if I have students that want to do that, that are not able to go master the worm guard, I want to be able to help them with that. So yeah, I just say it was a natural evolution.
How old are you at this point?
I'm 46.
46. So, you've gone through and you've been doing this since you were about how old?
21-ish. Yeah. So
okay.
Been 20. Yeah. Oh my Lord. A long time.
Yeah, so early 20s. Yeah. So it's crazy, isn't it? It just flies by.
Yes, it does.
I'm curious. So like, I remember all the old guys back in the day would say this. When I started, I was 18 years old. And I remember all the older dudes would say, oh man, when you're 30, you feel it. Or then it was like, 35. I really felt my body at 35, that kind of thing. And, as I've gotten older, my training has had to adjust. I don't train hard as frequently. And, just because the recovery is just not there and things get beat up or whatever. For you, obviously you went from training like 5-6 hours a day. And then obviously I'm sure it's changed. What are some things that you've done as you've gotten older? Let's say that you're getting ready to train and you're like trying to improve, you're trying to do something, because obviously it's different if you're coaching and you're focused on them opposed to yourself. But if you were training for yourself focused, like how would you train being a little bit older now to basically make sure that you don't get jacked up and injured and at the same time you're still able to get in better shape or progress or whatever it might be?
Yeah, that's awesome question, Tree. I went to school for exercise science, so I think I would just impart a lot of what I learned back then about just like general exercise physiology principles and different things like this. For myself, I feel that if you stay relatively strong and flexible, and what I mean by strong is I'm a big fan of body weight strength and conditioning and things that are a little bit more simple to use as you age, because I like to lift weight. I used to like to lift weights and all kinds of stuff, Olympic lifting and things like this. I tend to think as you get older, things like kettlebells that are more universal in nature are good training tools. But I think as the first and foremost, you keep a pyramid of good strength and flexibility, because as we age, that's one thing that I feel like goes more as flexibility. If you don't keep it, you start to lose it. You don't maintain it well, you start to lose that. And then once your base level platform is decent, then you stack the training on top of there, and you just listen to your body more. Obviously, being very busy, I think you tone down the training. If I'm really busy with work and whatever it is, teaching and this and that, then my training is going to drop down a little so that I don't get injured. As I feel better and better, I'll ramp it back up. I think as you get older, you have to be a little wiser and more in tune with your body so you don't get injured. Because injuries, as we age, injuries take longer and longer to recover from. So then the goal is to say, hey, how can I do my best to avoid injury so that I don't have to take off the mats or off of my other training for a long time. So I try to be very in tune with that, make sure I stay healthy.
Yeah, the injuries as you get older, they don't really go away anymore. They just like they either move, like you'll be like, yeah, man, my knee feels great. Damn it, my shoulder's bugging me now, you know, or you'll get an injury and it just sort of lingers around for a long time. That's like one of the things I talk to some of the younger guys and I try to tell them, like, look, like for instance, if they're in certain positions, like don't eat a toe hold in training or anything silly like that. Like make sure you tap out. Because again, if you get something that popped, you may feel fine for a few years, but that stuff has an accumulative effect where like later on down the road, like you're going to be all jacked up and it'll be from something that happened 5, 6, 7 years ago that like just you kept beating down and stuff like that. So, I think it starts young, but yeah, you're right. As you get older, you really have to be more aware of all that stuff and listen to your body a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's important, man. I think I do. And I came from early on training. We had this, boom. It was like go and knock holes in the wall.
Yeah.
It was hard training. About purple belt, and I saw some guys training really well in Brazil as well that sort of inspired this. But about purple belt, I think John and I, because we were there all day long, we really started changing the way that we trained all back then, which it became a little bit of a more playful environment. Still with like, I have this mentality that I say, and it's a weird saying, but I say you never let anyone do anything to you in training. And you're like, because if I said that and I left it at that, you'd be like, well, that guy's an idiot. What do you mean you never let anyone do anything to you in training? And what I mean by that is what that does, if you simply just allow people to pass your guard, I believe in my heart of hearts, I believe it builds bad habits because then you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing in that scenario. So what I preach is take your attributes away so that they can pass your guard. So whether my attribute is speed or I'm very strong, you take those things away. And now you're left, and if you do it well from the bottom, you're left with timing. You're left with movement and timing. If you can't use speed and you can't use strength, you're really left. The biggest attributes then now become timing and your experience. And so you start moving like that. And if your timing's off, man, a decent white belt will pass your guard if you don't put a leg over the top soon enough, if you're not using speed. So we did that early on to sort of take away a lot of attributes so that the movement was still there. But and it's hard, man. And all of a sudden you have these guys that are crushing you, but they're not as experienced as you. And so then that's why I always say, don't let someone do something to you. Make it so that they can do something to you. And you're responding as you would, but you just don't have the attributes to handle it. And I feel like it's a very valuable way to train, and it can get you training, and it really tones the injuries down because you're not like exploding into something or using a bunch of power to sweep somebody when it's not there. Your movement gets well and your timing gets so good that the technique just starts going like this. And and then little do you know, you're doing things much more effortlessly and without that boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, well, and then with the increased volume, because if you're not training like with all that intensity as far as like your physical body with the muscle and everything else, you can increase the amount of volume that you're getting so that you can train more because you're not getting injured, you're not being exhausted. It'd be like lifting weights. If you go in the gym and you're trying to max out every single time you go in, right, your body's going to break down eventually. But if you dial that back a little bit, you can lift more frequently, you can get more from it, same sort of thing. So
Exactly, man. If your coach has put 10 rounds on the board, 10 5-minute rounds, and you train 2, and then you got to take 2 off because you're tired, and you're like, it just means that you simply aren't pacing yourself well. Unless that's the type of training. If you're having a very competitive training round and you're only training fresh for that round, and then you got to sit out and then you're fresh again for competition's sake, so be it. But if it's just general training and you're just looking to continue to train, get better at skills, instead of taking rounds off, just change the way that you train. And then you again, like you said, you're getting that volume, you're getting time on the mat, and your technique's going to go better. Your skills going to increase, and you won't be injured.
So you mentioned attributes. So speaking of attributes, it just kind of made me think of this. You see guys come in the gym, new white belts or someone with a little bit of experience, whatever. What do you look for a student as far as attributes? Like maybe they'll stick around, and also what attributes do you see that you may think somebody's got something special, they can go far, they can be a world champion, those type of things. What do you look for?
If we're talking about just competition's sake or longevity as far as journey goes,
let's do longevity first, and then we'll talk about competition, like kind of top high level. There's a ton of guys, obviously at Renzo's and under John that have done very, very well. So what have you seen, and what do you think? What do you look for?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I think I'm sure you guys would agree. Some people will come into the gym, you're like, that guy's gonna be good, and they quit like 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have those guys are like, you have that, early on, you see that, you're like, whoa, this guy's gonna be she's gonna be amazing. Quit. Oh, I never thought that person would quit. And
then you have the dude that like you think is just terrible, and then that dude ends up just sticking around and gets really good.
That's right. That's right. John and I have a student. I trained him early on until purple belt. His name is Brian Glick. And when I moved to LA, continued to keep training with John. And literally, he's one of those cases where he just put the time in, and he's super smart, and he was super technical. He's very light. I think he might be 160 pounds soaking wet. But that guy, and if you never knew who he was, you would just go in and be like, oh yeah, that little guy over there, he's like 40, maybe he's in his early 40s now. I'm not really sure, but I know he's at least 40. And then he'd be submitting you on a regular basis. You'd be like, what just happened? So yeah, I think at this point, I look at more of a mindset than attributes. Now there are some. I mean, if we're talking MMA, for instance, you need some athletic attributes to fight MMA. I mean, there have been guys that have done it successfully at the highest levels, and you've got to be somewhat of a real technician in sorts for closing the distance and what we call shoot box and grapple box. Like a guy like, for instance, not saying he's not an athlete, but he's not. I wouldn't call Damian Maia, for instance, a raw, just super athletic human being. But man, he's done very, very, very well for himself. But if you put like George's athleticism into that guy, holy moly! Whereas George is he's just such a freak athlete. You have those freaky athletes, and that obviously, for attributes' sake, that helps. That's going to help anyone go further than what they might without that type of attribute. But I feel like it's more of a mindset. When you see guys enthralled with the training and enthralled with losing, rather than like banging their hand on the mat and getting all upset and walking out of the gym, those guys, if you can't turn those guys or gals, whatever it might be, if you can't turn their mind, then I feel like eventually they're going to be their own worst enemy, and then they're going to just eventually fade out. No matter if it's a pro athlete, a competitive athlete in the amateur stage, or for longevity. You see the best guys that stick around are the guys that have the best attitudes in general, and that can be exactly what we talked about earlier, where they see something as a challenge, or they see something as an inspiration, rather than that, this or that, or just a negative mindset. I feel like negative mindsets are something of everyone's demise if you cannot get them switched.
I don't know what you think about this too as a coach. One of the things that I've noticed numerous times is you'll get people like, let's say like two different students. Like one guy comes in and he's got a athletic background from some other place, some other sport that he played before, and he was really good at it, right? And then we have another one where the student doesn't really have much of a background, and they're just kind of there and they're ready to train. They're excited about it. A lot of times through my experience, I found that a lot of times the people that were good at something else somewhere else, right? A lot of times people don't like to be the beginner anymore. Like people, we like, everybody's been the beginner at something, you get good at it. And then to go into a new space where you got to be that beginner again, and you got to go from being the really cool person at this thing that you do to, I suck at this thing. Again, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. A lot of people struggle with that. Yeah. Whereas if I get people that are, essentially don't have expectations for themselves, they're just like, let's just see what happens, and those people tend to not be so wrapped up in that kind of thing, at least from my experience, where and there are anomalies to that. Obviously there are people that were really good at other stuff and they come in and they enjoy being the beginner again and enjoy like screwing up everything and they have fun with it. But it's definitely that mindset where the people that don't really set some expectation or just roll with the punches, so to speak, they definitely end up sticking with it longer and end up doing a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. I think you just said it. That's that expectation of what they feel like they should be, or hey, I was an excellent athlete at this. I'm going to come in and I'm going to be this great person in the gym, and then they realize, oh, this stuff is hard. Yeah. This stuff is difficult. It's not easy to be good at this versus another human that has a lot of experience. And yeah, I feel like that's a very good point. The expectation can really just wipe someone out, and then it's typically followed. Expectations are typically followed by an ego, and then that's never a good beast if you can't tame it.
I think the one unique thing about jiu-jitsu is a little bit unpredictable, because you can look at the skinny, kind of wimpy, nerdy looking guy, and they will like tap you out every minute. Yeah. And then, you can see some of these guys are very athletically gifted. And like you said, the mindset, they may break, if they don't get the position, or they get fatigued, or, cardio is one of those things too. If somebody has a good motor on them, but then they kind of wear out a little bit, they get tired. Sometimes you'll see that'll kind of break people, that pace, if you can't keep that pace. So I think the mindset mentality is really, I think it's a huge thing. But sometimes people surprise you too. I think, you see people that come in that are kind of not very good, kind of slow starters, and then they just hack away at it. They just don't get discouraged. And then they just, and then you give them a little confidence and you're like, oh shit. Then they get really, good. We've had some guys come in the gym. They're very out of shape, not very physically, haven't been very physically athletic, and probably not in a good mental space, but they kind of just hack away at it. And then they build themselves like a snowball.
Yeah, man. And I think that persistence is massive, as a massive benefit when you're doing jiu-jitsu. It's persistence, it's consistency. It's like everything else. Like you do it and you do it a lot and you do it in a routine. And I tell people, like, speaking of injuries, we talked a little bit about that, but when you're injured, don't take away that time of jiu-jitsu. You need to stay consistent no matter what's going on. So save that time for jiu-jitsu. It's those guys that typically, like you said, they're chopping down a redwood one stroke at a time. They're climbing Mount Everest 10 feet at a time. Like, the best way to climb up Mount Everest is not to look to the top and be like, oh my Lord, it's to climb 10 feet. It's to do 10 feet at a time. And then you're like, well, I can do 10 feet. I did this with a push-up exercise one time with my competitors. We had, I think it was like 200 push-ups that we had to do. And I said, guys, we're going to do 200 push-ups today. And they were like, what? I got all bent out of shape. And I'm like, yep. So like, guys, I want us to do 10. And we did 10. We did like had them do little increments of 10. And 200 push-ups is hell for anyone. But when we started to do increments of 10 and I gave them a little rest, we did it. Everybody got through it eventually. And it's like, see, guys, you can do 200 push-ups. Might take you an hour, but you can do it because we did them in little things of 10. It's that persistence and consistency over time. You can hack it away and become exceptionally good. So, yeah.
Yeah, 200 push-ups is tough if you're doing like good push-ups, doing like
That's
the
it.
full
You're
range
right.
of motion opposed to
Yeah, man.
um,
It's not easy if you don't do a lot of push-ups every day, right?
Yep.
So yeah.
Here's a question for you. So you've been doing jiu-jitsu since, obviously the, right around the mid 90s, and you've been involved with it ever since. And so you've been able to see a lot of changes, which, I've been doing it since 2003. And so there's a whole period there even before that. What do you make of because you sort of touched on the fact that you're not necessarily the biggest self-defense focused person, but you still train things that could be applicable to those situations, which I think a lot of times is the case for a lot of us. I think that for me personally, I think sometimes there's too big of a split with it, but I was curious to hear your thoughts. What do you make of the sort of the self-defense versus the sport argument split that kind of goes in jiu-jitsu now? Because it used to be when I first started, it was like jiu-jitsu versus all these other crappy martial arts that are going to get you beat up, right? And then somewhere along the road, then it became this sort of jiu-jitsu hating on jiu-jitsu back and forth.
Yeah. That's a very interesting question, and I'll say this: my jujitsu in general, if I taught one thing, like one way of jujitsu, it would absolutely translate into a street fight, 1000%. It's something I believe very strongly about, that your jujitsu should be able to defend you when it's the most important time, and that's to defend your life, right? Winning a worlds is a great feat. But that's not the most important thing in your life if you have somebody barreling in your door and your wife and kid are behind you. That begins to become the most important thing in your life. So I always want my athletes to know that, and my students to know that. So from time to time in class, I'll simply say, hey, if this was a street fight, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be doing this. You would be doing other things. But the self-defense kind of talk that you're saying is, I've done all kinds of martial arts. I did stick and knife fighting and stuff with guns and things like this. And what I mean by self-defense is kind of like where you're talking, is where this very traditional self-defense of, you get your hair pulled and you grab the hand and then you knee them in the groin and then you spin around and then you put this person, that stuff to me is just bullshit. Yeah. And so the really traditional self-defense, because I did it in karate, so I've been there. It's not like I've never done it. I've done it, and I know what works and what doesn't. And when you deal with somebody as a lot, when you're training jiu-jitsu every day, you start to go that's not going to work on somebody that really doesn't want to let go of your hair. They're not going to let go of your hair, or anything of the matter. So I tend to steer away from that really traditional self-defense and put more of a simplified self-defense where it's just grappling. It's just you're doing bare essence of grappling. I'm a big fan of MMA, so we have a whole system for shoot box, and I've got guys getting ready to fight here in Nashville. I love it. But do you need to know how to shoot box? You need to know how to throw jab, cross, hook, and bob and weave. And you don't need that for the street. You don't. You need to know how to distance management yourself, control the distance. And number one, get away. That's the most important thing if you can. And if you can't, then you need to know how to close the distance and rely on good jiu-jitsu principles that'll save your life. And I think that's where I draw the line there, because it's silly when guys start talking about self-defense that don't train real jiu-jitsu on a regular basis. Because I think it's real. What happened to karate? Because my style of karate, what I learned, we always sparred all the time. We could even do takedowns. We had fingerless gloves, and we could take each other down, and it was like a street fight essentially. But then because I came from karate, I loved it. I used to watch study all the traditional karate guys. What happened to karate is kind of happened into jiu-jitsu a little bit, in that karate separated, because there was early on in the 80s, it was full contact, man. It was, guys, one of my good friends named Gene Dunn was he was one of those guys. He was going over and fought full contact, and then there became the group that didn't really do that. They didn't really train a lot. And it became all these self-defense stuff where, you hit a guy's arm 13 times and then, you know what I mean? And then you hit him in the groin, and then you hit him in the head, and you do all these things. But then, like you mentioned, that's just going to get yourself. You're not going to get hurt if you try to do that stuff in a street setting. And I think jiu-jitsu, we have to be careful as coaches and as athletes and as practitioners that we don't allow jiu-jitsu to do the same thing. Or if it does, I'm not really good online very much, but I think like Bullshido, is that the name, Chewy, of like where it calls out like fake
McDojo.
Well, so Bullshido used to do it. So there used to be a website called Bullshido, and they would call out all the fake martial arts guys. And now I feel like the person that's kind of carrying the torch most notably is McDojo.
Okay, cool.
So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So, it's like the guys, there could easily be those guys that they just don't train. Like they don't train, they don't stay consistent. And then they start teaching stuff that's just sort of like off the cusp. It works for them because they don't train, and that's a dangerous person right there. It's like starting to use something that was very efficient and very good, and then now it's getting watered down because this person doesn't train with good people or doesn't train at all, and now they're making up moves and then just starts to go down this crazy road. So yeah, I don't know if I got off topic there, buddy, but I went down a rabbit hole. But anyways, fun rabbit hole.
No, it's good. And, I think the interesting thing, I always ask people, obviously, they've been around this stuff for a long time, because especially early on in jiu-jitsu, everybody that got into jiu-jitsu either had were interested, or at least some itch was there to fight. Yeah. It was some fighting thing was connected. I mean, everybody that did it and whatever else. But, to me, what's been really interesting is with this thing, the phone, everyone's got one. And so I feel like back in the day, you could kind of pull the wool over people's eyes a little bit. You could say this is how we'll block against self-defense or, fight situations and this and that. But then when you flip that phone on, there's tons of fights online. If you want to watch them, you can just literally put in Street Fight and you can watch the whole thing unfold. And you see that rarely is it this guy's going to walk at you like Frankenstein and put both hands on your neck. It doesn't work that way. There are these chaotic, crazy situations. And if you watch somewhere, someone has relatively decent combat sport experience, like wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, any of this stuff, even the boxing stuff's pretty good for punching. But if you see judo, jiu-jitsu or wrestling, I mean, you see the power of, say, takedowns and slams and trips and bodily control. Once you've clinched up someone, and like you said, if you've ever had to use it, really, I remember having students tell me I had to use it on the street. I had to use it in a situation where this guy was, being the aggressor against me and whatever else. And it was laughable. It was, like you said, taking candy from a baby. One of my guys arm dragged a guy and then tripped him to the ground and just put knee on belly. He's chill out. And even then, I think that's kind of a neat thing where for this with jiu-jitsu, we get so used to being in stressful situations where when we're in those stressful situations, instead of becoming ultra aggressive and yelling and screaming, you're hey, chill. And people don't know how to deal with that. I had a guy where it was a police officer. He tripped a guy down to the ground and the guy's fighting. And, he just kind of leaned into him and whispered, he said, "Hey, listen, hey, chill out, man. Just relax." And he said the dude went from fighting to kind of, okay. Whereas a lot of guys who don't have that training have to, it's much more aggressive and there's a big fight there. So it's a neat thing that we have.
It absolutely is. Yeah, and you're right. I think so as well. Early on, I think all of the jiu-jitsu looked like jiu-jitsu for fighting. Mm-hmm. It was all control based and smashing and not. But now, of course, it's a wonderful thing that we've got sort of three avenues now in jiu-jitsu, I feel. And I think that's probably where I got off topic. Sorry, but it is to answer that question of how it's changed is I feel like there's three separate jiu-jitsus now. There's a gi version, and because if you don't know worm guard per se or berimbolo at the lower and the adult level gi, you might struggle. You might struggle these days now if you don't have some sort of berimbolo or lapel based knowledge. Not that's your game, but you have to know what that is. Otherwise, you're gonna probably not do so well. So there's a gi aspect, I believe. Then there's a no gi that is based on sub only rules, right? Where it's okay to sit guard and just pull and sit. And then there's a jiu-jitsu for fighting, for MMA, that is based on shoot box and grapple box and punching and keeping dominant positions and a large volume of the jiu-jitsu. It would be control based so that you can hit while pinning and then move into a submission over time. So I feel like we're kind of lucky that it's split all three, but it's also unique now. I don't think it used to be like that. It used to just be like, everybody's going to go fight Worlds. Everybody's going to fight ADCC. Everybody's going to go fight UFC. And it was all like the sort of the same jiu-jitsu. And now it's definitely complete. It's went like to a different stage now because there's so many people involved and the rules are very different. And it's nice because now people can specialize in any of those.
Is there, this comes up constantly. We always get like, if we ever do a Q&A, we get a question on like jiu-jitsu in the Olympics. And we have our thoughts. I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Is that something you think would be good or bad for jiu-jitsu? And why do you think that is?
I think it really depends on what the jiu-jitsu would be. Because I don't think that there's any one jiu-jitsu that would be a spectator sport at the moment. And I think that's what's been commonly referred to, like, well, it should be a spectator sport, but it's like, I mean, we all know when we love jiu-jitsu, for me, it's spectator friendly. When I commentate, I can watch a 10-minute match because when you're there's this anticipation that something's going to happen. Yeah. And 10 minutes goes pretty quick. It doesn't mean that every 10-minute match I see at the World or whatever it is that I want to rewatch it. But at that time, it goes pretty quick because you're just waiting. You're like, all right, this could happen. That could, okay, well, and it goes pretty fast. So for me, it's a spectator sport. But for an untrained person, it's not always the most dynamic sport. So I guess it depends. I mean, I would love to see it be an Olympic sport because it would probably draw even more attention. But I think maybe not, but I think it depends on what jiu-jitsu is going to be. What is it going to be? What type of jiu-jitsu would it be? And if it's something that isn't good, then I'd say we don't need it to be in the Olympics. What's really the point of it being in the Olympics if we don't like what it is?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, man, whereabouts are you living now? Because you moved, didn't you? Because I remember I had a friend actually that I think he used to train at your gym out in LA back in the day. And then you've moved recently, right?
Yes. So last year, let's see, COVID really made a mess of things, didn't it? Like last year. Wait, was it last year or two? Yeah. Anyway,
we're still here.
Yeah, man, really made a mess of things. In 2019, the end of around August, my wife and son and I moved to New York. Actually, we went back to New York. She had work there as a photographer, and it was really easy for me to work in New York, so I could teach at Renzo's. And so we moved to New York with some kind of some thought that we were going to stay there for a little while. But we had always been coming to Nashville because Nashville is just such a beautiful place, and it's just where we knew we would want to raise a family. But in the meantime, we said, hey, New York is where we would like to go now. She has work, I can get work. Let's take a short stint and see what happens. So we went to New York back in August of 2019, and we're having a great time. But I told this story a little bit, is that my son got really sick there in December of what we weren't even sure could have been COVID, could have not been. It was very similar, similar symptoms. My wife got sick, and it sort of threw us into a loop of is this really where we want to raise our family? Is it really the place where we would like to raise our son? And we kind of thought, no, it's not really where we would like to raise him. I love New York. She loves New York, but it's hard there with a son. And so we decided I'd been to Nashville several times, and we were like, you know what? We're going to go make some roots in Nashville where we know we would like to raise him, and it's close to family. We have all the things that we would want to have. And so we came here in January of 2020. And I had two camps, one in Florida in January. And one in Costa Rica in February. And after that camp, I had been like, all right, that's when we're going to open a school. And that's kind of when COVID hit. So that just delayed everything back until just recently when I got the school open. And then now we're in drive, man, full speed ahead.
How's it working out for you guys? It's something that I've noticed from, say, me, like our gym, and then I've also talked to a few of my friends, is that it's like, 2020 was like a great, like for some people it was awful. And then I think for some people it was a great, like, they say hindsight's 2020, right? Like, 2020 was a good year to like put things into perspective. Like, do you like the way your life's going? Because right now, like, you're just sitting there staring at it, right? Like everybody's fixing their house because they're like, I hate my house. I'm actually here right now, right? They figured out, like, I don't even like my wife or my husband. I'm always stuck with him now, right? So how do you like things that are going, right? And I felt like we had a huge just like influx as soon as things started to begin to open up, where people were like, I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I've heard Jocko talk about it, I've seen Joe Rogan talk about it, I'm all in, like I'm coming in. We had a lot of people come in, like flooding through once things started to open up. How's everything been on your end with the gym now that things are beginning to open up and that kind of thing?
Yeah, same. We're having a lot of people come in now and just really excited to get on with life. And I think it's well put. The last year had been tough. Whether you bought into it or not, is a scary time. And I think people just got, like you said, they sort of started to go like, man, what am I doing? How could I be better? And then now that it's on, and people are excited to get back in and get in shape and get on with their life and learn something very valuable. I think anytime that you have something where there's an initial thought of like, is this it? Is this the apocalypse? Could this be it? You get that flash, like, am I really happy with my life? And then, like you said, it just gives you can reflect on some things. And so now I think it's a good time for people. I think people are ready to get back into it and meet some challenges that they have on their plate.
Maybe a random question. I've had this happen myself, which it ended up being nothing, but have you ever had a moment where like you either were talking to a doctor or something where you thought maybe like this might be the end of the road for you, or you might be getting some bad news where, like maybe they found a spot or something somewhere, like where you thought you may die from it? Like the reason I ask is I've had a situation like that. And I remember when it was like in my mid-20s, and when it happened, it was like instantly, it was like, okay, I know exactly what I need to do, and I want to go do this now, and like nothing's going to stop me from doing it. And it was actually really helpful to me. And since you mentioned it, I don't know if you've ever had a situation that happened like that before.
I've never had that situation. Thank God I've never had that situation. And I'm glad that you used it to motivate you. But I'll tell you what I have that does this, that I can't speak from where you were, Ben, because that's a scary situation, but I have a son, and it's like, he's the most motivational thing I have on. And so, every day I look at him, I'm like, yep, not going to fail this one. Going to be the most I can be to create some sort of legacy for him and make sure I create something that I can pass to him, and not just meaning like, hey, he's going to run my academy. I want him to be better than me. I want him to be, way, way, way better than what I did with my life. But it makes me work hard every single day. I'm sure the same with you. I get up almost every day at 4:15 in the morning, and I'm just like, time to work, time to go at it and get things done. And it's easy just to see him walking down the hallway, go, that's what motivates me every single day.
How old is he?
And it's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
How old is he?
3.
Nice.
3. He just got his first gi the other day, and he just lost his mind. He lost his mind. For me, I'm not going to ever push him into doing anything. I think jiu-jitsu is a very important part of life for self-defense purposes. But I think it's just natural that kids do what their dad or their mom does. They start doing it. Like, he picks up cameras and takes photos. That's what my wife does. So he comes with me to the gym and wrestles with the guys and thinks it's the coolest thing ever. So pretty awesome.
I think it's a beautiful thing, because that's something where our society doesn't have that as much, right? Like, because for a long time, like our fathers and mothers and things like that, they would go off to work and we would never ever see them. But before that time, you would have had like, farmers out in the field, or you might have a person who was a craftsman, and their son or daughter might come see them and watch them. And they get to see what their parents are doing. So I think it's neat that, you and your wife both can like incorporate, your son's experience, where he gets to see what dad's doing, or what moms do. And so it becomes a part of it. So rather than being, well, I'm going to work now and you don't actually get to see what I do, I think those will be some really cool memories for them as he's growing up.
Yeah. Thanks. It is for me. I'll tell you what. I'm hoping the same thing. I'm hoping he always remembers those things. So
some of that is excitement, like your excitement for what you do. Your enthusiasm and your wife's enthusiasm, doing these things, like your kids can see it. I have a 5-year-old, my son's 5, my daughter's 3. Nice. And we'll wrestle around and stuff. But, I used, before COVID, I'd bring my son to the gym and he just kind of would watch. And then after class or before class, we'd chase him around and stuff. And he loved it.
Yeah, man.
He loved it. He was so pumped up. And I'm excited to, start bringing him back to the gym and just have him just kind of watch. And Chewy brought up a great point, because I was talking to him about it and he said, imagine what memories he's going to have, like, of his dad doing these things. And he's probably going to be like, my dad can beat up your dad kind of thing. I was like, don't get me in trouble. But you know what I mean? So,
and he'll be right.
Yeah. Most of the time.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
This is fun, and it's cool. You want your kids to love what you love. Yeah. You can't, and it's kind of it's a delicate process, right? Because you force them or you push them into something that it can turn them off. So you kind of just expose them. And I feel the same way. Like, I feel like jiu-jitsu has been so powerful for me and for self-defense. Like, I wish I would have known it as a kid, just less fear. I'd have less fear, just throughout life. And so I think even though it's uncomfortable, and if it's not something you want to do forever, that's okay. But you got to have a little bit of that. You got to know a little bit, just enough, because that can, sometimes it can help you and maybe even save you in some ways.
I agree 100%, especially nowadays, because I always think that jiu-jitsu is just an unfair advantage. If you got a bully that knew jiu-jitsu against someone who, it's just like, man, that's just an unfair advantage. So I think it just behooves every kid to have some sort of understanding of it, just to make sure that they're just able to defend themselves.
Yeah. Shawn, is there anything in your jiu-jitsu career or your time with jiu-jitsu, is there anything you would have done different, or you wish you could change?
Man, I don't, it's hard to say that if I would have done anything different, because I've enjoyed my journey. I enjoy the road. I enjoy the path that I'm on. Goodness sakes, man. I almost like, when speaking of the story with Nino, he basically talked me out of it, because when I trained with him, and I really wanted to compete with the gi at that time, kind of a lot. And I had said, like, what, I'm going to move to Brazil, Nino, I'm going to come down there and train with him. And he was like, are you crazy? Do you know who you have right here on the mats? Like, don't do that. Like, stay here. This is the best teacher that you're ever going to have. Stay. And so I stayed put. So, maybe I was just lucky in the way that, things just sort of guided me along to the paths that I've had. And so I don't think I feel off anything off the top of my head. I don't like to have regrets.
Sure.
So I try to do my best at, like, well, let's try that. And if it doesn't work, oh man, that wasn't cool. But I tried it and then get on with it. So I think those things, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I had some falling out with some business partners that I don't like. I don't like those things. I've always been a guy that I like to solve problems. As I mentioned, I like to have conversations, and I think misunderstandings or miscommunication or lack of communication can make problems. So I always, those things are always like, I'm always like, man, that kind of sucked that those happen, but they did. And it's as I get older, I'm like, well, that's okay that those things happen. Everything's not going to be perfect in life. So you get on with it, and then you learn from it. As long as I feel like I've learned very well from those things. And so then you're able to continue to drive and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any very unique or fun Renzo stories? Like, cause he's pretty wild guy. He's, I remember the one time he tweeted, that some guy tried to rob him, and he was like tweeting it or something while like he beat the guy up. Yeah. And he's, I've always enjoyed watching. I think was his documentary, was a Legacy, documentary. Yeah. That's one of my favorite documentaries. Just watching his passion, like it kind of, he's very charismatic as well. Do you have a fun Renzo story that you can share?
I mean, there are so many stories. Like I think, to be really honest, and those crazy stories, because I mean, I think he had a very crazy childhood. I mean, he was always involved, and he was like in the mix all the time. And I think that's sort of his personality, is just to be like in the mix, no matter what. He's in there in the mix, always have some sort of challenge. But I think really what people, I mean, the people that know him know, but I think maybe the people that don't know him so well is how generous he is as a human being. Like, man, there's a classic saying, like, when you go to an expensive restaurant with a bunch of expensive people, how do they treat the waiter, or how do they treat the gardener, or how do they treat and I'll tell you right then and there that he'll have them sit with him or sit with us at a table and eat and pay for the guy's food and treat that person like they're just part of the family. And I think that his generosity is what really shines, because you get that wild side of a guy that's like that, tweeting him like smacking some bully that needs it. Like, you're just like, wow, if Renzo had a nickname, it would be Karma. You know what I mean? It's like, you just met Karma. It's coming your way. His name is Renzo Gracie. But there's also that generosity side to him. He'll just take anyone under his wing and help people out. And I think, he did that with me. I managed the school for him. He helped me out big time early on because New York was so expensive. Like, there was a summer where I wasn't working, and I was like, Renzo, listen, I need to take the summer off. I'm not going to be able to pay for class. He was just like, no, you're not taking the summer off. You're going to train. Like, just whenever you get money, just pay me later. I don't care. Like, start paying when you can. And back then, I think that was fairly rare, because people were just trying to get jiu-jitsu going. And so it's just generosity in general. All of the people that you see he helps over time, it's something that I think is probably, all the crazy stories are there, but there's also this side of like, man, this guy will take the shirt off your back take the shirt off of his back in a second and give you whatever you need. And I think that's really what sets him apart as a human.
That's awesome. Shawn, just wrapping up, what do you have going on? I know you've got some instructionals out. Can you give us a little more on that? And then, tell us about your gym. Just kind of, we said it's in Nashville. Just give us a little more information on that, where people can kind of get a hold of you.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I've got another one coming out on BJJ Fanatics. I've also got that'll be out probably in the next month. I've got one called Dynamic Leg Pummeling, and that's just basically on my own site called online.ShawnWilliamsBJJ.tv. You can get that one, and it's all literally about leg pummeling scenarios. So I don't know. I do a lot of float passing. I think it's called float passing now these days. I'd call it a ladder passing, and using your legs to remove hooks and pummeling around things like knee shields and Z guards and things like this. I've been doing that for years and years and years and years. And then I think finally over time, like Gordon's been using it a lot, and now Nicky Ryan's using body lock passing and those things that I really started at Renzo's and been using for years. I have a course on that basically called Dynamic Leg Pummeling. So right now you can get that. And then a host of other like little freebies, man. I made a little enhancement kit that it's just a mindset thing that I think is very good for beginners. And it's on the same website that you can get that. It's just called an enhancement starter kit, and good things like that I think are really help people with their journey. And then I'm here at Nashville, man. My academy is at Brentwood in Brentwood, Tennessee. It's called Renzo Gracie Nashville. I felt very strongly about keeping it the name of my teacher. So and we're getting after things, man. It's we're here in Brentwood. So that website is just RenzoGracieNashville.com. So you can find me in either of those places and come visit or reach out. And if you got some questions about jiu-jitsu, I'd love to help.
That's awesome. Just finishing up, do you have any predictions for where jiu-jitsu is going? Like, what do you see on the horizon? I'm just curious, with the leg locks, you may have seen that coming, because that kind of came out of Renzo's gym, that whole progression. Do you have any ideas on what you see for jiu-jitsu coming up?
Well, I think now we're in this phase where like now the world knows leg locks, right? It's still evolving. I mean, it's still we've been doing leg locks like I think the earliest, when 2001 is when we really started doing leg lace, like that position where, or lace leg, whatever you want to call it. Inside Senkaku is what I think people call it, or saddle position. We started doing that in 2001. So I think that those things are still evolving. I mean, it's been evolving for a long time, but there's still things like when more people get involved, it tends to continue to evolve. I think that game's going to still continue to evolve. We'll see that. I think the game where the body locking, I've been a big preacher for body lock passing and near side underhook passing for a very, very, very long time. And I'm still trying to get it in there. Like, guys, let's forget about the far side underhook when you're passing. It's the near side underhook that you need. I think more things like this that are based on aspects of wrestling, control aspects of wrestling that are now being brought or have been being brought into jiu-jitsu for years. I think we're still seeing, and we will continue to see that sort of evolution of that game, where now guys are good from not just wrestling, but the transition from the feet to the floor and into scenarios where, like when I pass per se, or have my athletes pass in Nashville, it's not even the cross side anymore, man. It's like it's from butterfly guard into the mount or butterfly guard into back control. So we're kind of sometimes majority of time skipping over a whole position because it's not necessary. It's just this evolution of how do we get to the back faster? Barambola did that early on with the gi. How do you get to the back faster? Well, you Barambola somebody with the gi and the guard, and now you've just basically went completely around all of that struggle and went from bottom to the back. I think those things are going to continue to evolve. Just evolution of from one position to the most superior, which is back, in as little steps as possible. So I think that's kind of where we're going.
That's awesome. Shawn, thank you.
Oh gosh, thank you guys.
Appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with us. And it was fun. It's fun. We always like these kind of hearing kind of back in the day how people get started. It's probably some of my favorite interviews that we have is with these guys like you that have been around for a really long time. So it's fun.
Well, it's a blast, man. It's a pleasure to be on here with you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. And good luck with your gym. I'm glad everything's going well, especially moving in such a crazy time period. So I'm glad everything's going well for you, bro.
Yeah. Thank you. And you as well, man. Best of luck to you guys. You guys are ever down this way, your house, of course, man. It's your house. Love to have you come in.
We'll do a stop by.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
guys.
I appreciate it.
All right, guys. So that was the podcast with Shawn Williams. Hopefully you guys got something from that. I mean, for me, when I'm listening to it, there were things that I either think as a coach and that I'm like nodding my head yes, or there's some things that, I thought were useful ideas for training. So hopefully you got the same thing for you.
That's great. Enjoyed, I always learn something, always figure something out. Like these guys have been at it for 25 years, however long he's been doing it. I mean, they've got some kind of gem in there that, like, even, you've been training for 20 plus years. I've been training for over 10 years. It's like, you'll find something that's like, oh, I've never thought of it that way, or I've never seen it that way. So, if you're a white belt, and you're listening, I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of good insight in there for sure.
Well, anyone. And I think that, just one of the biggest tips to take away from him is like the fact that, when you find someone that does something that you want to do, they've blazed a trail.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to follow their trail forever, but at least it gets you started.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine you came to a giant forest and, there's trees and stuff like that. And then there's a trail, or you can fight through the thicket. I mean, you can go either way, but if you get on the trail, at least you're going to get going first. And then later on, if you want to kind of go off your own place and blaze your own trail, you can begin to do that process, but you can do it when you're further along, you're deeper into the woods and everything else. And so it's a useful idea. A lot of times in artist circles, you'll call it like modeling, which is what we do, right? We take things from other people and then we sort of use it and then we make it our own. There was a book, I forgot the name of it, but they were talking about the idea of practice, right? Whenever you're practicing something that you learn from something, there's variation because it's bad. Right. So for instance, your coach shows you something, you do it. It's not going to be as good as your coach's. It's very, and let's say if you have a student base of like 20 people in that day, there'll be a variation of each person, how they're screwing it up.
Sure.
Right. Now, eventually they do it long enough and then it becomes consistent. right? So then you'll get this consistency that happens where then everybody's doing a good job of mimicking you. But then the people that stick with it long enough, then variation reemerges, because then creativity becomes a part of it, where they're like, hey, I liked how you did this. Let me try it out this way. And so you see that, right? And that's what we do. And so again, it's a great idea to learn from people. And again, you guys get to do this on the podcast. You get to literally listen to people and their experiences and how they did stuff, which you used to have to, which again, you used to only be able to do by pretty much in person, having to actually meet the person in person,
Yeah. It's kind of cool, like that we use these means of technology to actually just have regular old conversation with people. It's like we're doing this thing that's happened forever, and we're actually get to do that and share it in a way. And because not a lot of people have these long form conversations anymore.
A lot of people don't, because people are too, quote, busy, or they mess around their damn phone too much.
Yeah.
Or, like you think about it, like you think about like in public, like you watch people, they don't like just like if you're eating dinner, if you guys are listening to this podcast, if you eat at dinner, put your phone away. Like, don't ever go to dinner and then start, unless you're like you and like sometimes me and Jess will look something up together. We're like, hey, what was that thing? And we'll like look at it together. But like if I'm at dinner with my girlfriend or with my friends, my phone stays in my pocket. Sometimes I'll leave it in the car. I'm like, I don't want it to be around me. I don't want to be disturbed. This is time with people in person, like I don't want to text. I don't want to scroll. I want to be here. In fact, I just deleted pretty much all my social media apps off of this, because I can do them on my iPad now. Which I couldn't do before.
Really?
Yeah, because for instance, Instagram didn't used to work on the iPad. So now I don't need them on there. So now I can get them all off my phone. So now my phone is used for talking and for emails and things like that. But otherwise, no, I don't need to scroll. And if I want to get on there, make a post, I got my iPad.
Fancy.
I just you see what it is. It's a life suck.
It is. Yeah. Time suck. Yeah.
It's a time suck for your life. It's like, it's basically just, you're not doing anything, it's almost like it's almost masturbatory, right? It's like you're not doing anything. Feels good, but nothing's happening, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like nothing's happening. I mean, it is what it is. Like we laugh about it, but it's like you get people that'll scroll for hours and you're learning about random crap facts that you don't even need to know. In your brain, it does have finite amounts of space, right? Like eventually you're like, some of this useless crap is going to push other stuff out. And plus, when you think about the way that it's manipulated now to like get you to think certain ways,
the way the information is curated.
Oh, dude, it's terrible, because like now you're this last year, like when we talked about 2020 being hindsight.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't learn this last year, you didn't learn anything, right? The fact that everybody's trying to manipulate you to get you angry, upset, fearful, these sorts of things, because there is money to be made in division and in manipulation and power to be gained in those things.
Yeah.
Right. There's no power and money to be made in unity. Right. There's just not, because it's like, then you're making people happy. And it's like, yeah, okay. But you say, we are fighting the enemy. You must join us. Donate to us. Do this. You know what I mean? It's always this. It's like there's an enemy. There's a bad guy. There's something around the corner. Be afraid. Right. And this is how you keep people divided, and it's ridiculous. But then if you go and like you put the phone down and you actually have conversations in person, you're like, oh, everything's kind of cool. And most of us are trying to do the same stuff for the most part, but then if you get on social media, it's like, oh, it's terrible and everything, whatever. It's like, no, it's not. It's especially like, especially in America, they'll say, oh, it's terrible. No, it's not. Like, we got problems you got to fix and everything else for sure, but we can fix those. But we for lots of parts of the world, we live in unprecedented times of abundance, like of abundance. Like there are people that are still struggling and everything else, but you look at the time period, like relative to what we've ever had, like it's not that bad. Go as a history buff, go rewind and go look at what people were dealing with before. Pretty good times to live in. Yeah. Like, so it's just one of those things where if you get distance from it, from all that crap, you're like, oh, things are okay. You don't have that stress on you. Plus you get a lot of time for all the things. Like people say, oh, I never had enough time. Get off your phone. You got to have all kinds of time. Yep. So anyway, that's my rant.
I like it.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense. I think with everything that's gone on that we've realized, now it's even, I think I see more value in like when you get, I cherish those moments a little more, because those were taken away, like spending time with people, spending time on the mats or training and that kind of stuff. When that was taken away from you, realize how much it means to you. And so you don't really take it, or you try not to take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes like, I'll just train next time, or I'll do this next time, or I'll focus on this conversation next time. But maybe there's not next time.
There's not, and we're not meant to be isolated. We're humans. We're social creatures, right? Like I've talked about this several times on the podcast already. Like when we came back to training last year, holy moly, dude. I mean, I left out of that gym several times. Like when we have these classes, and I remember some of the big ones that we first started having. I mean, I'd leave the gym, and my heart felt full. Like there would just be this overwhelming joy and gratefulness for what was going on. And even we were kind of talking about this off air, like sitting there, like the other day I was getting sushi with my girlfriend, and they're busy right now because a lot of their servers had to leave or change jobs or whatever, because there was no work. And so now they're coming back and they're understaffed and everybody's eating again. And so the service wasn't terrible. I worked as a server, so I could tell you it was terrible. But it was reasonable. It was slower than normal, but but it was reasonable. This woman gets up and she's she's like barking or whatever. And I remember just staring at her, and I'm like, we couldn't do this last year. I remember last year at this time getting takeout from this place because I wanted to support the restaurant, because I it's a good restaurant, and I like the people there, and wishing I could just sit down and have a dinner with my girlfriend and just have a night out and have a date. Couldn't do it. Now we're back here. I'm thankful. So if it takes them 5-10 minutes to get me my check, a little bit longer than what I'm used to, big deal. Hey, I'm glad that we're here. Like, what is wrong with you? And again, it's some other projection thing. It's probably was something bad day or whatever. But again, you don't want to take it on other people. But that gratefulness, like if 2020, like I know it was terrible for some people. I know people lost family members, things like that. And it's awful. It's terrible, terrible, terrible stuff. But for a lot of us, I think one of the beautiful things that it gave you is just hindsight and perspective. Like if you look at it, back at it, and you were sitting around going, what's really important to you? What really matters? Whoa, like I really miss this thing. I really miss these people. Like those are the things that matter to you.
Yeah.
Right. Opposed to like, do whatever else silly stuff that we occupy our time with. And when you look at that, you're like, oh man, that was really important. It was a really useful lesson to have learned during this period of time, rather than sort of scratching it as like bad thing. Like, no, I don't think it was a bad thing at all. I think because good and bad are names that are exchanged easily, right? Like, like a lot of times people have an injury and it ends up being the best thing that ever happened to them. We say it's bad at the time, but later on it ends up being kind of a good thing. And so I think 2020 for a lot of people is rough or bad or whatever. But I think long term, if you learn from it, what happened last year, I'm like, oh, this actually was pretty useful.
It can be what you take from it.
Your perspective.
Yep.
Just like Shawn said on the podcast, right? It's your perspective. When you're down in the hole, when you're down in the valley, your perspective, the way that you perceive the world around you, is going to shape your reality, because everything is subjective. Our reality is subjective, right? The way we view everything, it's all subjective. And when you view it with a more positive light, like it's something where that ends up that becomes your reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it was what do I really want? What do I want? Am I spending my time the way I want to spend it? Am I doing what I want to do? So that was for me that year, and it sucked in some ways, but it was great in some others. I got to do things that I didn't have time for. So it was fun. So in some aspects. Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, hope you enjoyed the podcast and our little after podcast rant. Again, as always, guys, if you want to support the podcast, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Just a ton of cool stuff in there. Go check it out. And again, we support it. What I think we should do? I need to think about, we should give away a little something or other to people that sign up, like a little gift. I don't know what we're going to do, but you guys just stay tuned, because that's been sort of bouncing around in my thick noggin.
Patreon.
My thick noggin, basically people that sign up for the Patreon, I'm going to give you guys something. I don't know what I'm going to give you yet, but I'm going to think about it. And for those of you that sign up, you'll get something from Eugene the Schuster. I'll send you guys like a
signed photograph of you,
vial of my sweat after training or something.
Signed photograph of you in your ranger panties, cutting your grass. What do you think? No,
I don't think so.
Nobody wants that.
I don't think anyone wants that.
I tried, everyone. I tried. I know I've been getting emails. Everyone's telling me that.
And if you do, I think you're trying to join the podcast Patreon for the wrong reasons. It's not an OnlyFans.
Maybe if you want an OnlyFans.
No, we're not
with
doing that.
Chewy.
No, we're not doing that. I would have a very large, like like male to female ratio. It'd be like
Everyone,
100 guys for every like one woman or something.
yeah.
Like, join your OnlyFans, bro.
Are you showing jujitsu?
Yeah.
Is this a jujitsu thing?
Yeah. If you guys want to check out Charlotte's Web, check them out. charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jujitsu. Try the sort of 30-day challenge. Try stuff out. See how it works. Free for 30 days. One of the tinctures or gummy packs. See how you feel on it. And then again, see how the supplement affects you for your training, your recovery, inflammation, everything else, and how well rested you feel and your overall sense of well-being. Because again, there's certain things you can't say, but again, I've had innumerable benefits from it personally, and so I've been a user for a user. Sounds like a drug or something. I've been using CBD for a number of years, and there was actually a cool study that I was looking on Dr. Ronja Patrick's.
Yeah.
I think there was a cool study for with CBD positively affecting people with Alzheimer's. So I'll have to look into that more. But yeah, which again, I think I talked about that last week because of the gene or whatever. Also, again, check out Matt at epicrollbgj.com if you're looking for some new MMA shorts. I love our grappling shorts. I love his new Velcro-less shorts. No Velcro, no. Just a drawstring and some elastic band, really comfortable shorts. And again, guys, if you want to jump in and see what I've got going on a regular basis, you can go to jujitsu.net, and I have a daily newsletter that I send out. And again, if you want to join that, there's a button that says free ebook. Click that, and then you'll get some free training resources sent to you in the old emails. And then you'll get my daily newsletter, which is typically Monday through Friday, sometimes the weekends. And you'll get that. And then, if you enjoy it, which a lot of people do, I have a fairly large readership. You can hang out and see what's going on. And if for some reason, if you don't like it and you're like, hey, Chewy, I don't want these emails no more, then you can just press that unsubscribe button, and I'll see you on your way. So, you got anything?
No. I mean, some stuff. I've got some stuff.
You've got some stuff coming up.
I've got some stuff in the works. I'm revamping my website, but I'll leave you guys in the dark for right now. But it'll be good. I got some new products coming out and some other stuff, so I'll let you guys know about that soon.
All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll talk to you next week.